Good morning, everybody. I think you're going to see there's a common theme across some of the presentations. Moses, our CEOs are our current day prophets, right? Today we're waiting for Steve Jobs to come down with his tablet, right? If you look at this headline, he defied downturn, cheated death, and changed our world. That's a big bill for a CEO. We see increasingly lists of most admired, most valued, most respected CEOs. And as academics, we were really struck by the fact that there really hadn't been any systematic look at who had delivered performance sustainably over the long term. Something we talk about it, but it really wasn't getting measured. And so we set out to do a study that would take a look at the performance of CEOs over the length of their tenure. What we decided to look at was total shareholder return, both adjusted for industry and for country, as well as market cap change. And we basically took all the CEOs in the S&P Global 1200 and BRIC 40 who were in office from 1995 to 2007. This is our top 100. We made a list. One of the most interesting things you can see right away that there's a whole number of them we couldn't even find a photo for. So interesting in the age of the celebrity CEO. Incredible performance in this top group. So nearly 1,000% on average shareholder return. Not household names. I don't know how many of you can recognize some of these guys. They're in the top 20. Okay, retired CEO Samsung, Jung Yun, Bert Brecht, Rakid Ben-Kisser, really not household names. We found that to be very, very, very interesting given the headlines. Only one woman in the top 100, only 29 in the list of 2,000 CEOs. Interesting thing as well, partially has to do with the fact that very few women have been in post prior to 2002. So partially it's a historical effect, but really very small numbers. Very little overlap with the list of most highly paid CEOs. There were some, but not a high overlap. And obviously this feeds the debate of how do we take into account longer term measures of performance? Do we need to rethink compensation for today's age? And I think that this study can inform that to some extent. Who are they? First, very widespread performance. It's not limited to the US, to the UK. In the top 50, we had 16 countries represented, 25 if we go to the top 100. And so that's, even in the top 5, 2 Americans, 1 Indian, 1 Korean, 1 Russian. So really, really widespread, as well with regard to industry. There's industry effects. So just to give you an example, energy is overrepresented in the top 100 relative to how many there are in the total sample. On the other hand, you have things like automotive, which, as you might expect, is at the bottom of the list. We've got Hyundai in the top 29, at number 29 in the top. They're mostly insiders. This is a picture of the famous Deus Ex Machina. We want a savior from the outside, particularly when a company is doing poorly, but the insiders had an edge in performance, and even in troubled companies, there was no difference. The MBAs did better, despite some vivid anecdotes, and this was particularly the case for the younger CEOs. So my boss, Frank, is very happy to see that finding, and we can talk more about why that might be, but an MBA effect. Also what we call the runway effect. If you take over a company that's doing poorly, you have more upside. And so those who were taking over companies that were not doing so well tended to perform better than those running more smoothly working kind of companies. And so that raises also a conundrum about how we're going to evaluate CEO performance comparatively. Real issues with passing the baton. In our sample, there were very few cases of a top-rated CEO being succeeded by a top-rated CEO. There tends to be a kind of a drop-off, and we can also think of some vivid examples there. Interesting thing to kind of mull over. So just to wrap up on this, and again, this has been the theme, our CEOs are superheroes and supervillains. By the way, the villain's always a corporate guy, right? But there's a real argument to be made here for the effect of CEOs, and I think that means that we really have to think hard about how we're going to evaluate them, particularly as they're reinventing the job, because this is not a story about a lone hero. It's really a story about these quiet CEOs, a lot of them under the radar screen, but building relentlessly these high-performing teams that are all about delivering sustainable results. Thank you very much.